It was a cold, rainy October evening when Emma moved into the old Victorian house on the edge of Blackwood Forest. The house had been a bargain, too good to pass up according to the realtor. But as Emma stood in the grand foyer, her breath visible in the icy air, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house was beautiful, with its ornate woodwork, stained glass windows, and a grand staircase that spiraled up into shadow. But it was also eerily silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The previous owners had left, in a hurry, the realtor said, leaving behind furniture draped in dusty sheets and a strange, lingering scent of mildew. That first night, Emma tried to settle in. She lit a fire in the hearth, unpacked a few boxes, and made herself a cup of tea. But as the hours dragged on, the silence grew heavier, more oppressive. She began to hear things, soft, indistinct whispers that seemed to come from the walls. At first, she told herself it was just the wind or the creaking of old pipes. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until she could almost make out words. "Get out!" Emma froze, her teacup slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor. The voice had been clear, cold, and filled with malice. She spun around, her heart pounding, but the room was empty. The fire had died down to embers, casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. "Hello!" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response, only the faint sound of dripping water. She decided to call it a night, hoping that sleep would calm her nerves. But as she climbed the stairs to the second floor, the whispers followed her, growing louder with each step. By the time she reached the master bedroom, she was shaking. The room was freezing, despite the warmth of the rest of the house. Emma climbed into bed, pulling the blankets tight around her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The whispers continued, now coming from all around her, overlapping in a cacophony of voices. "You shouldn't have come. Leave while you still can. She's here." Emma buried her head under the pillows, trying to block out the voices, but they only grew louder, more urgent. And then, just as she thought she might go mad, they stopped. The silence was deafening. Cautiously, she peeked out from under the covers. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the curtains. And then she saw it. A shadow moving across the wall, too large and too solid to be her own. It stopped at the foot of her bed, and for a moment, everything was still. And then it lunged. Emma screamed as the shadow enveloped her, cold and suffocating. She thrashed, trying to fight it off, but it was like trying to wrestle smoke. The whispers returned, louder than ever, filling her mind until she thought her skull would burst. "You're ours now." When Emma woke the next morning, the sun was shining and the house was silent. She told herself it had been a nightmare, a product of stress and exhaustion. But as she got out of bed, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the wall beside her bed, written in jagged, dripping letters, were the words, "Welcome home." From that day on, the whispers never stopped. They followed her everywhere, growing louder and more menacing with each passing night. The shadow returned too, always lurking just out of sight, waiting for her to let her guard down. Emma tried to leave, but every time she packed her bags and headed for the door, something stopped her. A force she couldn't explain, pulling her back inside. The house had claimed her, and there was no escape. And so, Emma remained in the old Victorian house on the edge of Blackwood Forest, a prisoner of the whispering walls. If you ever find yourself driving past that house, don't stop. Don't even slow down, because if you listen closely, you might hear the whispers too, and they'll never let you go.